Hello everybody and welcome to this Workstream session. I'm going to pass you over to our chair, Sarah Wilson-Medhurst.
Hello and welcome everybody to this Workstream session 1, which I'm delighted to chair. I'm Sarah Wilson-Medhurst. I'm Head of Learning and Teaching Excellence at Bucks University. So this session is around the student voice, and we have 3 presentations with 6 presenters, and I'll be introducing each of those in turn. So the session format, just so you're aware, we're going to have 3 15-minute presentations from each of our presenters, and then there'll be 15 minutes of questions at the end, and just please feel free to feed those through as they occur to you, and we'll feed those through to the presenters in the last 15 minutes. So I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker from Winchester University, who's going to be looking at developing student ambassadors. So I'm very pleased to welcome Michael Hall. Michael is a senior lecturer in education and evaluation and research officer in the widening participation team at Winchester University. His research interests focus on equity and access in education, graduate employability, and the educational progression of children from armed forces families. And he's part of the widening participation team at his university and is involved in implementing their access and participation plan. So welcome, Michael, and over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much for inviting me to the conference today. I'm very pleased to be able to share with you some of our thinking around student ambassador development, and in particular how we've responded to the COVID lockdown situation. So just to provide a bit of background of where we've come from, like most institutions, I think we have a team of student ambassadors with our access and outreach work and our student recruitment work, and we've maintained these teams for a number of years. About 2 or 3 years ago, we reached the point where we were trying to grow our access and outreach work with our partner schools in the area, but we were hitting those general resource constraints that I think are very familiar to most of us in the sector at these times. And we developed the idea of having outreach associates, which were drawn from our existing team of student ambassadors in order to undertake higher level support for outreach development and delivery. So our initial idea was to be able to devolve some outreach work specifically to associates, rather than to have it everything delivered by the central team, which would enable us to sort of work more intensively with our schools across the age ranges. To go along with that, we created a particular bursary to recognise enhanced responsibility that those students will be undertaking, in addition to their sort of regular ambassador pay. And alongside that, we recognised the need for an enhanced programme of skills development to support their own development as they grew into the role, and also to support their prospects and employability beyond university. This associate development framework was sort of the centerpiece of what we wanted to do to differentiate the outreach associate experience from the student ambassador experience. And we did a few things around that. We came up with a development framework which specified a number of qualities and skills, and I'll show you that in a moment, that we would hope that students would engage with and develop over their time as associates. And alongside that, there was a range of development activities we put in place, including development days or workshops, some specific themed workshops around elements of practice related to our access and outreach work, some reflective writing tasks whereby we'd encourage associates to think about and reflect on their experiences and how they were developing as professionals and as people in the process, and some one-to-one reflective conversations with key members of the team. So each associate was allocated one of our outreach coordinators as essentially their mentor or supervisor, however you want to express it, and they would be responsible for supporting and challenging their development as time went on. This is the associate development framework. I won't go through this point by point, but we broke the qualities and skills of an associate into 4 main strands: inclusivity, our thinking around inclusion, our recognition of diversity, and our engagement with the characteristics and diversity and experiences of the learners that they would be engaging with, but also the issues of inclusivity at a national policy level, to understand the context in which universities and HE providers were working. Secondly, there was this question of leadership, both their own personal leadership and their part in playing a part in collaborative teams. Thirdly, their approach to creativity in terms of drawing on their own interests and experiences to support and contribute to our outreach agenda, and also being able to respond to things such as challenges in practice and demonstrating a solutions focused approach to the things that we all experience when we're delivering these kinds of work. And fourthly, reflection, the value of actually engaging in reflection on yourself and your own development. And we hope that these 4 things would filter through into and have benefits not just for their outreach work, but also for their broader development and their employability post university. The principles we drew on were grounded mainly in Kolb's experiential learning cycle, where we thought of students particularly as learning selves who are locating their own lived experiences in these new contexts in which they were engaging. Something else we were interested in was thinking about associates' self-efficacy, their own perceptions of their own abilities and how those were changing. And drawing on Albert Bandura's work, that was we held that to be one of the key things in understanding their own capacity to grow and develop in the future. So the development activities we put together needed to be oriented toward real world situations. They needed to be participative, and they needed to be learner centered. So it was not about simply abstract knowledge, passive reception of knowledge, and demonstrating that they were ticking the boxes in terms of performance. We didn't want this to turn into a traditional performance management framework, and we thought that was key to making the framework as effective as possible. So this is what the programme effectively looked like. So over the course of the academic year, 1920 academic year, there'd be a number of key points, development activities across the course of the year. In parallel, associates would be delivering events in school and taking part in our on-campus outreach and further delivery in schools and our summer schools and residentials, which a lot of that was backloaded towards the second semester and the summer term, particularly around the university holidays. However, we had the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown, which, as you can see, took out not only almost half of our planned development activities, but also a good deal of in-school development. So at a stroke, we lost a lot of the real world opportunity to engage in outreach and to reflect, and potentially to engage in that kind of collegiate work that we'd hoped that the development programme would foster. So we were left with that situation that, of considering how could we best continue to support our associates in their engagement and development, particularly those who were graduating in the summer of 2020, in the constrained circumstances that we were all working with. And therefore, how could we continue that, making participation as an associate meaningful in these circumstances? We're also concerned with the potential for students and associates to feel isolated or disconnected if you lose those kinds of real world activities and the collegiality around it. So there was a clear thread about supporting our associates' well-being as individuals here. And some of the risks we saw of this to our associate programs, the loss of those real world development opportunities, I've said, but also the loss of momentum. In our early evaluation, we had several points of measurement for our evaluation throughout the programme. We were starting to see some really good progress in terms of student self-perception and their reflection, and COVID lockdown risked losing that momentum altogether, and therefore the erasure of gains made through participation in the scheme so far. So the challenge was, how could we maintain those sorts of benefits, avoid losing the things that we've already achieved and that students have worked so hard to do over the course of the first few months of the programme. So our response wasn't particularly earth-shatteringly innovative, is the way I put it. We took the view that the best that we could do immediately in terms of the capacity and the resource constraints that we had as a team was to start with our third development day that we had scheduled for the summer, and reformulate that as an online event through Microsoft Teams, and try and build that program into something that was about the future of the associate program, so we could give our ambassadors some real stake in how we responded to the COVID situation, how we could develop the programme going forward. Particularly important, given that we were anticipating that the constraints of COVID will continue beyond into the next academic year, and as we know now how things have developed, and the fact that we really did not see us going back to face-to-face engagement with schools at least until Christmas, this coming Christmas, and I'm not quite sure how things will pan out after Christmas. We're still playing it by ear. We also had our coordinators continuing to maintain contact with individual associates and try and maintain that relationship, and continue to encourage associates to reflect on their own experience and to complete their writing portfolios as part of the evaluation. So I'm going to talk a bit about the evaluation that we've undertaken. I should stress that we're talking about small numbers of students participating. I think around no more than 10 at any of these points of data collection. So this should not be taken as a rigorous statistical analysis. It should really be indicative of how things have gone. We invited students to reflect on their own self-efficacy and give themselves a score of 0 to 100 on a range of themes that are described here, things like finding solutions to problems, recognising when they're not coping well, celebrating things that do go well, for instance. Again, these are derived from the framework that I discussed earlier. We took 3 measurement points, one at the baseline right at the start of the academic year at our first development day, then a midpoint collection just after Christmas, and then a final just after the final development day. What we can see is that we saw for most of our statements increases between the starting point and the midpoint, hence the sort of momentum that students and associates have built up over the course of their first few months of engaging with the programme. But then we saw in a lot of those cases the gains would tail off, but either the gain would become shallower, or in some cases will go backwards a little bit. So the things such as acting on feedback about my performance, working constructively with others and resolve conflicts with others, we'd expect those scores to go back a little bit simply because of the loss of practical opportunities to engage in outreach activity. Interestingly, this ability to recognise when they're not coping well also went back a little bit. I don't know whether that's due to lack of opportunity to recognise things that go wrong, or simply an awareness of their own experiences through the COVID lockdown situation. So not quite sure how we disaggregate those. The other thing to notice is in quite a lot of these scores, students started from a high base of their own self-perception, and that simply got stronger. So these were broadly positive in terms of the constraints that we've experienced and the challenges we've had. So a few reflections that I have on the experience. The framework, I think, was flexible enough to support some development activity even when we lose some key opportunities and our chances to engage in real world activity were constrained. We did see engagement with the scheme and with the evaluation be quite variable even before lockdown. So we saw a slight tailing off of the level of enthusiasm and engagement, naturally as academic deadlines hit and the pressure of balancing all of our workloads engage. But I'd like to think that this suggests that we managed to maintain that level of engagement rather than losing it completely. So that the move to online, the framework supported a move to online that enabled us to really mitigate the worst that could happen in the COVID breakdown. Those who stayed the course seemed to maintain their gains in self-efficacy, which again was a positive here. But that is all sort of counted against the fact that it's impossible to quantify the counterfactual. We don't know what would have happened otherwise had COVID lockdown not happened. So that's my reflections have really got to be tempered by that. Obviously, a larger cohort would enable a more robust measurement. It would have been great to have more students and more associates as part of this programme, but we were sort of constrained by our capacity to ensure that participation. And particularly in this academic year, where we have fewer opportunities for students to participate in outreach activity, it's about managing that expectation going forward about what associates can get out of the role. And I think one colleague in my academic department reflected that when lockdown hit back in March, we made a year's worth of progress in a couple of weeks in terms of technology and processes. And the fact that we did go through such a rapid change, I think, was very beneficial, ensuring that we did have those resources in place to maintain engagement. So COVID has been sort of a double-edged sword for us in that sense. It's taken away a lot of our real world opportunities for supporting our ambassadors, but at the same time it's forced us into new mindsets and new ways of working. So I will leave it there. I'd be very happy to take questions at the end of the session. So I'd like to hand over to our next slot.
Thank you very much, Michael. Sorry, my microphone was on mute there for a minute. Thank you very much for that. And as you've said, please put some questions into the chat box and we'll pick those up at the end. I'm just mindful of time, so we're going to hand over to our next presenters, who are going to be talking about unlocking lockdown through literature and giving students a voice in a pandemic. So I think this leads on very nicely actually from the previous presentation. So I'd like to introduce our speakers, Lauren Starkey and Steph Copsey from the University of East Anglia here in the UK, and Steph is the outreach manager at her university, and she leads a large outreach team on projects focused on HE knowledge and skills and attainment raising programmes. And Lauren Starkey is the Outreach Events Officer and Director of UEA's Festival of Literature for Young People, and it works exclusively with local students from disadvantaged backgrounds. And Lauren delivers a diverse programme of campus-based events and activities focusing on HE knowledge and attainment raising, and she's also Director of UEA's Festival of Literature for Young People. So Lauren and Steph, welcome, and over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to kick off. You won't hear too much from me because I'm going to pretty much immediately hand over to Lauren, who is our festival director and is the one that has created this wonderful programme. But I just wanted to start off with a little bit of an introduction to what our approach was during lockdown. So like all outreach teams across the UK, we had to very quickly move our work online. It was really important for us to take a pause and not rush into it, and to really think about what we were doing and why. Some of you may be aware of the evaluation framework that we use. It's called Narupi. So we base all of our work around this evaluation framework, and it was really important for us sort of not to lose sight of our purpose and our remit, whilst also considering sort of the new challenges that young people that we work with are experiencing and indeed continue to experience. So we really wanted to be reactive but not reactive. So we wanted to be able to react to the needs of the students but also maintain our purpose because we thought it would be quite easy to sort of have purpose slip into well-being and mental health, but that's not actually our area of expertise. What we are good at is inspiring and encouraging young people's interest in a particular subject, and really working with them on a long-term basis to encourage that. So that was really important for us to keep in mind throughout all of our work over the past few months. A really key point for us as well was the digital poverty that we have in Norfolk. So we are a rural county, we're a campus-based university, and we work very closely with Norfolk County Council, particularly in the first couple of months of lockdown. And we had a very clear picture of the digital poverty that the young people in Norfolk experienced. So lots of young people didn't have access to devices or internet, or had very patchy access. So we spent a lot of time considering non-digital ways of accessing young people during lockdown as well. And a really simple thing we did was develop a really great partnership with a local printer who did deliveries for us as well. So I'm going to hand over to Lauren now, who's going to talk about the lockdown diary specifically and what we did with that.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Steph. Just to make sure everyone can see the presentation, can't they? It's a bit funny on my screen, so good. Okay. Yeah, so I guess one of the projects that we ran this year, which really explored student voices, which obviously is what this stream is about, was the Lockdown Diaries, and this was delivered as part of our Festival of Literature for Young People. So going back before lockdown, FLIES, the Festival of Literature for Young People, is a creative writing and literature festival for students in Norfolk and Suffolk, aged 11 to 14. It's a week-long festival, so we have up to 300-400 students a day come onto campus and take part in a series of author talks, creative writing workshops, masterclasses, performances, live performances, and also to give them a taste of HE. So they get to meet the academics that teach on the creative writing courses, the literature courses, and also they get to meet the students, which is really important. The workshops are led by award-winning authors. So previously we've had Anthony McGowan, Frances Harding, Chris Riddell, Alex Scarrow, lots of, the list goes on. But also they're run by and delivered by staff and students from the university's literature, drama and creative writing faculty. And because again, it's so important to showcase the work that goes on at universities within creative writing, and creative subjects, and to get the students thinking and experiencing how literature, drama, creativity is taught at university. So that's really important too. And also just to showcase the talent that we have within our staff and students. Before lockdown, we had already been thinking about ways to develop FLY. So we've run it for a few years now, and it's only recently become a widening participation project. So we're already looking towards moving the focus from the authors and actually onto the students. So looking at the students as creators and focusing on their future aspirations and goals. So we're looking more towards, we still want authors to come, we still want authors to deliver fantastic workshops and presentations, because the students thrive and they absolutely love listening to authors. But we actually want the authors to talk more or less about how their journey and how they wrote their book, and actually direct the students to, how can you start your creative writing journey? How can you, how do you get to where you want to go? So we still want the authors to be there, but we want the focus to be on the students. And actually the digital project this year, the Lockdown Diaries, really helped us to fulfill that goal this year. So for us, it was a welcome challenge and something that was really positive for FLY. As I said, the project this year was called the Lockdown Diaries, and it consisted of a series of creative writing challenges, competitions, and also we developed a skills resource, which I'll show you very shortly. But the Lockdown Diaries really was a way for students to reflect on lockdown, and a way to process their thoughts and feelings using a creative platform, a way to remember what was happening, so a way to document the things that were happening. I think we all, when something big happens in our lives, we always think, oh, I'll remember this. you know, I'm never going to forget this. But we forget the conversations we've had with people. We forget the way we're feeling. We forget the things we hear and see. So it's really a way to document that and to remember those thoughts and feelings, but also to realise their potential. So for some students, this would have been really challenging, the challenges and the activities that we set them without being in a room with other students, with teachers, with authors, helping them to develop their writing, then this would have been really challenging, and some of the activities would have really pushed them. So we wanted this project to help them realise their potential and also realise their future aspirations. So do they want to study a creative subject at university? Do they want to be an author, an illustrator? And also the project gave students to feature in the Lockdown Diary story collection. So for every challenge that we ran, for every competition that we ran, we've taken a selection of those entries and we've turned that into a story collection. And it's coming together at the moment, and it's fantastic. Some of the entries that we've had have really pulled on the heartstrings, but also given us so much positivity and lifted even us as staff reading them. So we're going to have that professionally typeset and designed, and it will be available digitally on the Fly website when it's finished for everyone to read. But also we'll print those and send some copies into schools for the students that were involved in the project. So really it's going to be a celebration of creativity and a way to preserve, as I said, the memories, the thoughts and the feelings of the students involved. So the project really was a way to give students a voice during a truly extraordinary time. So the first activity that we ran was the 8-week challenge, and as the name suggests, it was a challenge. There was a challenge each week, and it ran over consecutive weeks. The first week was delivered by our patron Alexander Gordon-Smith, and we had lots of other Fly veterans get involved, and they set the challenges each week. So the challenges were presented in the challenge cards that you see on screen, and it was really important for us not just to set the students a challenge and expect them to, you know, away you go. We needed to help them out and to support them. So that's where the tip section comes in on the challenge card. And really it's almost a way to replace the creative writing workshops that we would have run during Fly, help the students develop their skills. And each challenge focused on lockdown and getting them to reflect on what was happening. So obviously the first one was to write either an acrostic poem or an acronym using the word lockdown. We had proverbs, given important advice and guidance on COVID and staying safe. We had observations of nature, writing postcards to your future self to help students get through it. And as I said, we had some fantastic entries, so it was really successful, really good. Once we finished the 8-week challenge, we launched the craft of storytelling. So this was a skills-based creative writing resource, and we developed this with a group of fantastic authors, poets, performers, illustrators, comic book illustrators. Again, all veterans of Fly, so they've either visited Fly before or they are staff and students at the university working within our literature and drama faculty. So this is what the resource looked like. And we explored 4 different storytelling forms. So the resource was all about storytelling and how to tell your story. So we looked at prose, poetry, script writing and comic books. We also featured a HE section. So not only do we want to support the students in their creative writing and help them express their thoughts and feelings creatively, but we also want to get them thinking about GCSE options, A-level options, university courses, and really show them that university isn't just about studying maths, English and science. If you're a creative student and you want to study creative writing, you want to be the next J.K. Rowling or whoever, then, you know, university could be the right place for you. So that's why we included the HE section of the resource. In collaboration with the resource, we also launched the Great Escape competition with Frances Harding. Now, during lockdown, you know, we were really struggling to keep the students' attention and to get them involved. I think there was so much out there for them that we thought, okay, so we can put the craft of storytelling out there and hope that the students read it, but I don't think it's enough just to put it out there and expect that they'll pick it up just because. So we ran the Great Escape competition alongside the resource. And we hoped that by entering that would encourage them to read the resource. And the reason being, so for the competition, we encouraged students to submit their entry in one of the 4 forms that we explored in the resource. So that was prose, poetry, script writing, or a comic book. So if the students had never written a comic strip before, then we encouraged them, okay, so go and have a look at the craft of storytelling resource. So we ran these 2 things side by side and hoped that they complemented each other. And we did see that that worked. So that was a really good experiment for us, I guess. As I said, reaching our audience and actually keeping our audience engaged was really challenging during lockdown, as I'm sure many universities felt. The first point of call was the teachers, because we have such a strong relationship with the teachers, with our teachers in the region. But we also noticed a lot of schools that were open actually used the challenges and the competition and the resource during lessons and also set it as homework. We saw a lot of that in the feedback from students and that their teachers had set that as homework. So it was fantastic that we could help support them in their lesson planning during quite a strange and difficult time for them. We used targeted social media campaigns, so Facebook and Instagram, and used Polar Quintile 1 postcodes and school data to reach students, teachers and parents, because parents are really important influencers during this time. We had an estimated reach of about 6,000 a day and really positively had around about 100 unique entries for the 8-week challenge and then another 100 for the competition. So really fantastic. We found that using the targeted social media campaigns worked really well, but also the teachers just passing that information on to students and getting them to do it as part of their lessons really did work well. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Steph for this bit.
Lovely, thanks, Lauren. So as Lauren said, we were really nervous, if we're honest, about how this was going to pan out, because we knew how difficult it would be to access students during lockdown. But we were pleasantly surprised, and there was appetite for it. So we did go through our really strong contacts that we have in schools and colleges, and with the help of social media, we're able to not just reach young people, but in our view, reach the right young people, so those from the most disadvantaged backgrounds. I think we still have work to do on that over the coming year. That remains one of our biggest challenges for individual sign-up activity. How do we reach those and that we're really keen to reach? But we know that getting schools on board works. And we know that a long-term program works as well, getting those young people on to a program that continues over 8 weeks. We really saw a significant change in impact from our previous program, which would have been a one-day program. So that's been a real positive that we're definitely going to integrate for next year, if we do manage to run something back in the normal world. In terms of our evaluation, we're still waiting for our full evaluation report, but we've had some top lines from our evidence and evaluation team, and it's all been incredibly positive. So participants have come away with more knowledge of what it's like to study a subject, and particularly a creative subject at university, as well as becoming more interested in those subjects, which was really key for us, that we weren't just going to access students that were already interested in creative subjects. We wanted those that, thought, that's not for me, I don't enjoy writing. But we saw that we had students who had no interest engage in the programme, and actually we did spark some interest in creative subjects with them. They became more confident in their own writing skills and working independently. And from the verbatim feedback, we saw a lot of students articulate that they had been exposed to literature types that they had never seen before, which is really important to us as well. And we saw really lovely comments from them about increasing their confidence, pride and self-belief, which was really important to us, especially as those outreach practitioners in the room that know how much motivation we get from seeing young people, seeing the impact on them, and lockdowns have taken that away from us, but seeing that feedback was really motivational to see that actually, yes, this did make a difference. We didn't see it with our own eyes, but we know that we did make a difference, and being able to give those young people confidence, pride and self-belief during what is a horrendous time for them was really important. So just lastly, I just wanted to touch on the future of outreach and what we've learned from this programme that we will embed going forward. Clearly, we need to focus on attainment raising. All the evidence shows that the most disadvantaged young people have fallen further behind than their more advantaged peers. So anything we do needs to be linked to the curriculum. We've seen the increase in importance of evaluation, which is something that we've always taken very seriously at UEA, but we need to identify very quickly what works, because schools will have limited capacity to engage with us over the next year, and we will have to work smarter and harder than ever to access the most in need. And so that's when we work with teachers, social media, and those different means. But we have seen lots of positives from this programme, like I said, and we're looking forward to sort of embedding that digital delivery back into our normal world, because we've seen such a fantastic impact from it. So I believe Lauren had, if we've got time, Lauren has just a small clip of some of the work that the students put together.
I'm just wondering if we do have time, because we're sort of over 15 minutes in.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Can we make it available to people to?
Yeah, we can. I mean, it's available. So this video is actually it's just a short clip delivered by some UEA alumni drama students, and they're just reading some of the entries that we had from the 8-week challenge, and it is really lovely. If you'd like to view it, then just pop onto Twitter. It's on there, so it's on the UEA Fly Twitter account if you do want to view them. And they are really, really touching, really moving. So.
That'd be lovely. If the moderators can put that in the chat, then people can perhaps pick it up. Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Thank you, Steph and Lauren. That's really interesting. I think some things that we're picking up is that things that have happened as a result of COVID and how we take those forward. And I know I'm also a school governor, and I know that things that have been learned in lockdown, and they're looking at how do we take those things forward. And I think that's also coming out of the first presentation. So lots of positives to take forward. I think for the for ongoing work. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to hand over now to our final presenters who are going to be talking about emergency remote teaching during the coronavirus epidemic. And so a warm welcome to our colleagues from Strathmore University, Kenya. And we have Dr. Alfred Kitawi, who's the director of the Centre for Research and Education and a lecturer in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the university. And he's carried out a number of monitoring evaluation projects in a range of areas, and his interest in publications span the areas of education management, community engagement, and the use of instructional technologies to facilitate learning. The second speaker, Dr. Caroline Kariuki, holds a PhD in economics from Curtin University, Australia, and her research involves examining the determinants of foreign direct investment in African countries. And she's also a lecturer at Strathmore, where she teaches economics and econometrics. And she's also the director of education development at the university. So very busy, I think, Caroline. And then we have Paul Ochieng. He's an economist by profession, and he's gained his economics undergraduate and postgraduate degrees from the University of Nairobi, and then later specialised as a sports economist. And at present, he is the Dean of Students at Strathmore University, and he has a passion for the youth and runs several personal development programmes under his office. So welcome, the three of you, and over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. So as has been mentioned, my name is Dr. Caroline Kariuki from Strathmore University. So my fellow presenters and I are from Strathmore University, and that's a university in Nairobi, Kenya, and Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya, and Kenya is in East Africa, and our coastline is on the Indian Ocean. So so if you're ever on this side, you're most welcome to come say hi. Yeah, so that's my introduction. Thank you.
My name is Paul Ochieng. I am the Dean of Strathmore, as you've just been told. I have a passion for the youth. I have a passion for reaching out to them, and that's why I've been in this position for more than a decade, and I look forward to having a good presentation with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul and Caro. My name is Alfred Kitawi, so I'm the one who's going to begin the presentation. The title of our presentation is Emergency Remote Teaching During the Coronavirus Crisis. So our focus is basically during the lockdown period, not before the lockdown, but only during the lockdown period. Now, our presentation will have three main parts. The first part will be an introduction to the concept of educational outreach and the context which we are facing now. Then the approach we used in terms of deploying ERT, emergency remote teaching, and the outcomes. And then the third is the way forward. So now, before the pandemic occurred, the traditional way of actually engaging in outreach was either through after-school programs, summer programs, visiting museums, etc. But for now, many organizations, including universities, are forced to innovate new ways in which to basically reach their students. Now, in terms of the context, we know currently we have 800 million enrolled learners who have been affected by the coronavirus pandemic. This is out of the 1.18 billion. Now, in the Kenyan context, just to give you a background, 40% live below the poverty line. Here we're talking about around $2 per day. And in Kenya, after the pandemic, the poverty line actually grew by close to 50%. And then in Kenya, institutions are required by the government to close on the 15th of March, meaning that we have been in this situation for close to 6 months now. Strathmore is one of the private universities, which means that it doesn't receive any funding from the government. Public universities receive funding and also governance support from the government. And also the pandemic has affected public universities because now the budget has been slashed by close to $400 million. Now, in terms of the disruption that has happened in Strathmore, just to give you an overview, we have 5,700 students. And now, out of these, we have some who are doing diploma courses, some doing undergrad courses, and some doing postgraduate courses. In terms of funding, 80% of our fees are from first stream, second stream funding, and then 20% from third stream funding. Third stream funding means funding from consultancy activities, engagement with alumni, and other similar activities. And then out of these, 7% goes towards scholarships, meaning that we also support some students who cannot access the fees, which are a bit higher than other public universities. So in our context, when you're explaining the different aspects that we are going to use, school in our context refers to any academic unit. So be it a faculty, an institute, or any other similar academic unit. Then the four pillars we used to engage in our analysis post COVID, okay, after COVID happened until now, is the UNESCO framework, UNESCO 2020 readiness framework, which has four main pillars. The first pillar looks at technological improvements so that to enable students to still continue their learning activities, taking cognizance of the experiences of the students, the voice of the students. Second is how to enable faculty to deliver content. Third is the kind of pedagogical support and home-based support which we provide to students plus faculty. Here it's important to emphasize that when you're talking about student voices, you cannot leave out the voice of the faculty because the two are sort of intertwined. Then the last one is the kind of monitoring and evaluation tools which we used to support emergency remote teaching. So those are the four pillars which we used. So my other presenters basically are going to focus on each of these four pillars and then the current outcomes which we are trying to structure. Thank you.
All right, so thank you for that, Alfred. So now I'll carry on and talk about the data collection and analysis, and also how the emergency remote training was deployed in Strathmore University. So for the analysis and to collect findings, we used video conferencing monitoring reports from Zoom and Google Classroom. We also relied on reports from the e-learning Moodle platform. And for the video conferencing monitoring, we had daily logs, collected daily logs of activities, collected school administration, just information such as lecture times, number of students, any challenges we had, any sessions. And these reports were collected from March 2020 to June. And so we use mathematic analysis to find out, the main things that came out from these reports and So in answering our first objective related to technological improvements and education outreach, what the university did was to ensure that everyone involved in learning had internet connectivity. And so the university negotiated for internet bundles for both students and staff for them to continue to be engaged. Each month they got about 10 GB of data to them, access class lecturers to teach. Computing devices, the distribution of laptops to first-year students, and also we tried to ensure that the material they needed could also be accessed from, let's say, tablets and other devices that they have. And also, faculty encouraged to stand across the university so as to help the students follow his what with the help of technology, we had at least, so all like able delivering the sessions, and a lot of the times we have
Caroline, I don't know if it's just me. We're getting quite a bit of interference on the line. I don't know if.
Yeah, okay, let's.
Sometimes you're clear, and other times not.
Okay, all right.
That's better. That's better now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So in answering the second objective related to content readiness, so again here we made sure that the lecturers shared the material on the e-learning Moodle platform, where they shared their class recordings, their notes or slides that they had used. There was also monitoring of how long students were connected to the class, because this helped us to assess their concentration and also the intensity of that connectivity between the students and the platform that was being used. And in encouraging students to be able to speak out and engage in sessions, there was also a recommendation to break the classes into periods of 40 to 45 minutes, just to allow students to be able to, let's say, voice out what they're learning and for them to engage with the lecturers. Our third objective related to pedagogy and home-based support during the emergency remote training time. Lecturers again deployed their content on e-learning. They also received training on how to use different video conferencing tools. School administrators were heavily involved in making sure that the students were, let's say, had enough data bundles, that they knew when their classes were, Also, they helped us a lot with collecting information that went into the emergency remote training reports that helped us with this analysis. And yes, and of course, anyone who needed access to internet was given assistance with that. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, because that was really important to know what is happening. So lecturers got a guide to help them, see and learn, as this was something new for many of them, how to conduct themselves or how to conduct virtual sessions. There was also a template for administrators to know how do we perhaps collect information from the classes that will help us learn more on what we can improve on. There was also surveys that were carried out to evaluate, the emergency remote training progress. So things like looking at the lecturer engagement, did they come to class? Did they help to support the students? Were they consistent maybe in their classes and how they were relaying their material? And also student engagement, because it's both ways. So looking at the internet connection, the number of students in class, are they participating in class? And also assisting maybe the ones that perhaps didn't have laptops and seeing perhaps some of them needed to purchase laptops. And we were hoping there won't be too many, because actually even before the COVID-19 pandemic, first year students, when they join the university, the undergraduate students always get a laptop, as that's included as part of the tuition. And yes, so those were what we, that's what we did during this time. And now I'll hand over to my colleague, Paul Ochieng, to carry on with the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So I'll take you through the last part of our presentation, which is basically the other aspects that we had to provide to help us with our emergency remote teaching. So first and foremost, the key thing there was management support. So management support was very important because it assisted a lot with rolling out the various aspects of university operation. Then secondly, another aspect again that we took a lot of effort looking into was mental health. As you know, this was the first time many of our young students were going through such a stressful moment collectively. So mental health was another thing that again we tried to help our students in so that they can be well. Then also we realized that many of our students use the university as a place to nourish their nutrition. Basically, they can buy a balanced diet in the university. So we started hosting webinars on nutrition and also on other ways they can overcome the many challenges they were facing now that their homes had become their parents' working place and also their university. So to the outcomes of this process on the four main things. First of all, technological readiness, e-content readiness, pedagogical and home support, and monitoring and evaluating. So all these outcomes, we looked at them from the prism of student and staff. So whatever solutions we are proposing, whatever way forward we are proposing, we want to look at it from the prism of student convenience.
Paul, we've lost you.
There, great. So the five main ways, main way forwards that we are having are, the first one is Strathmore University is considering using the lots of data we've gathered to analyze it in a way that we can improve the processes of the performances that are there in the university. Then secondly, the e-content that we are using now, we've realized that going forward, this e-content should not take over the entire teaching operation, but it should be providing complementary service to the whole teaching process. Thirdly, our way forward in this, after this COVID, also as we are going on with trying to open up, will be that some of the units we've realized that can be taught through blended learning, and that's what we want to use. So we don't want that content we developed e-content we developed just to go like that. We want to use it to blend some of our studies. Then to our last two way forwards, the second last is we have realized that our students are not engaging in deep learning. So we want that as we continue with this learning during the pandemic, they should not miss out on deep learning. And finally, we've realized that the current generation enjoys podcasts and videos. So we are putting a lot of mental health issues, socio-economic challenges, solutions on videos and podcasts so that the students can use them as and when they are able to listen to them, because we realize also there's something called Zoom fatigue. So we are giving them their freedom to listen and to watch these videos that are very good for them. So thank you very much, and we'll open up the session to questions as per the moderators prompting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that talk, and I think highlighting some of the positives to come out of the situation in terms of learning about effective learning and teaching and supporting students in various ways. So what I'm going to do, we've actually got about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to take the questions that came in order, if that's okay. And if there are any questions for our last presenters, please do pop those into the Q&A, into the chat box. So two first questions for our first presenter, Michael. The first question was, did you adapt the content of the training for students in light of COVID? So, e.g. how to deliver well digitally? And then also, have your outreach associates been running any online activity over COVID, and how have you managed that?
Well, the two questions are related. We didn't make the immediate transition to online outreach delivery. We wanted to be guided by our schools. We knew they were dealing with the pressures of how to do the basics over that time, so we were very much mindful that we weren't wanting to sort of overwhelm schools with too many new initiatives. We developed a couple of home-based or student self-directed activities, such as extension of our reading skills programme and maybe a creative writing programme over the course of the summer that students could do themselves and be supplied by the schools to do that. We've spent the summer reformulating and thinking ahead to what 2021 is going to look like, and we're still in the process of that. We're still also working out what our associates' contribution to that is likely to look like in practice. So our training will evolve to reflect our thinking in that sense.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think there's some questions here for Lauren and Steph, sort of linking ideas really. So they're interested in how many students participate in the lockdown diaries, but I think you did give some indication of how many. I think it was about 6,000, wasn't it, with around 100 entries for each of the programs that you ran.
Yeah, so we had so for the 8-week challenge we had 178 unique entries for the 8 weeks, and that was students that were coming back each week as well. And then for the Great Escape we had around 90 to 100 entries. But yeah, I mean, for us it's very positive. I think the fact that it's only open to students in Norfolk and Suffolk, and because students were, working from home, homeschooling, just them being at home, you're already competing against Netflix, games, everything else that they've got going on, social media, mental health, all that sort of stuff. So very positive for us. But maybe because it was topical, maybe because it gave students that creative outlet to reflect on what was happening. And also, yes, we did offer prizes for the competition and for the 8-week challenge. So the 8-week challenge wasn't based on the content of the writing. It was more so we offered the eight weeks of the challenges, and then for any student that submitted 6 or more entries, they were put into a prize draw. So their names were just entered into a prize draw, and we just pulled them at random, and we had book vouchers on offer. But then for the Great Escape competition, that was very much, we had a panel of judges. They read through every single one, and so the best were picked from the entries, and we had 3 age categories, and the top prize for each one was a Kindle Fire, and then we had book vouchers as well. So yeah, did offer prizes, but worked very well and helped the students engage. But we did see most, so it was open 11 to 16, but we saw most engagement from sort of the 11 to 14 age range, which is what we generally expect for Fly, really.
And I think the last you've answered part of the question. It was about, you know, offering prizes, but I think you touched on the non-digital ways you were helping schools during lockdown, and we just wondered if you could expand on that further. And it also perhaps links to some of the ideas from our last speakers as well, so if they want to come in on that area. But yeah, so what sort of approaches that you used?
I'll hand over to Steph for this one.
Yeah, so like I said, we built a really great relationship with our local printer. So we've put together packs essentially of resources that we've made as digital resources, but we made them printer friendly so that schools can request like a pack for year 7 students, year 8, etc. So they can request those and they'll get delivered straight to the school, but we're also embedding that function into our website as well. So where a student isn't able to download something or access it online in an easy way, as long as they can get to our website and click request printed resource, they'll be able to get a copy of it as well. So that will be something that we'll be developing over the next year, because as I said, we do have significant problems with digital property in Norfolk.
So I think that leads to our last presenters want to add some of the ideas that they've tried. We're sort of just about out of time, but I just want to give you an opportunity to add anything around that, because I think you've obviously had some interesting strategies in your institution as well.
Alfred, you may add.
Yes, just to add a bit, we also adopted a format. We are using Moodle as our e-learning platform, yeah? So we actually adopted a standard format to deploy the content, which is called instructional design. So, and this has been applied consistently. So there's the aspect of how you deploy the materials. Then there's the aspect of how you access the materials. And there you're looking at the devices. So the LMS enables you even to use your phone. So some students who don't have computers actually use their phones, even sometimes while driving. So they know that there's a tick in terms of attendance, and they know they have to attend and they have to participate. And then there's the aspect of monitoring now. That is the assessments, which have to be tied to all the activities which are actually happening. So those are I think the 3 main activities in terms of the actual teaching and learning, apart from the side support, which Paul can mention.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we are actually, if I'm correct, we are actually out of time. So I wanted just to say thank you to all our presenters and for also the questions in the Q&A. And I believe resources will be made available to people after the session, and I'm sure that people will be following up with you as well. So thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, it's time for some virtual lunch.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.